from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight, breaking down the 2021 NFL Draft. The Broncos selected 10 players, a few more than I expected at my 7 that I initially had predicted, but I'm not going to take this one personal.
No, because when I went down in between rounds down to the war room there and talked to George, he said, you go tell that no good, you-know-what, Ryan Edwards, that I'm deliberately going to trade back just to mess up his prediction.
Listen,
and I want to see the tattoo.
I felt really, really good about it when they traded their 6th rounder to get Teddy Bridgewater. They had 8 picks, and I was like, they're going to trade up at some point. And lo and behold, by this day 2, they traded up to get Javonte Williams. We'll get to that pick here in just a little bit. But in that moment, for a brief second, I actually thought that the Broncos might actually only draft 7 players. I was feeling pretty good, but that was very fleeting.
Well, you could have just listened to your co-host, and he would have told you exactly how many picks it was, and then you would have saved yourself the horror of having to put ink on your skin.
Again, that's not something I ever agreed to, but for some reason, you keep speaking it into existence, and I sort of feel as though I'm going to get trapped into this. But
I feel like you're a baseball outfielder. You're backpedaling to the wall.
Today, I'm going to go ahead and hold off on that. Let's talk about the picks. The Broncos selecting Pat Surtain out of Alabama, cornerback at number 9. They had 3, maybe even 4 offers to trade back. They had considered what the trade-up cost would be. I mean, basically everything George Paton said was going to happen. He said we are going to be in on a lot of these things. We're going to find out what our options are. He didn't like the value of the trade back, and so they stayed there, and they took, as they felt, the top defensive player in the draft.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, Vic 2 years ago had made some comments about playing 6 DBs as base, and I kind of asked him about that in our exclusive interview with Vic Fangio after the draft, but he kind of termed it a little bit differently than I did, and I wish I'd pressed a little further because he wasn't talking about dime as base per se, but he was talking about 6 DBs. He was looking for kind of hybrid DBs to be able to be those linebacker, kind of things, so you're not giving anything away in the run game. And we all know that Vic Fangio has kind of been the future of defense in the NFL over the last couple of years. Everybody's kind of, or I say everybody, the vogue defense anyway in the league is converting to what Fangio runs. And so, him being out on the forefront of that is not surprising to me personally. I think it surprised a lot of people because they said Pat Surtain, well, they went out and paid a couple of corners.
Yeah, Ronald Darby and Cobb Fuller.
Yeah, and then you got Bryce Callahan already. You drafted Ojemudia last year. You've got Bassie will be coming back from injury. You got a lot of corners, and so I think that people were surprised by it in that regard. But if you look around the division, you got a division that's got Travis Kelce and Darren Waller, and we've already seen that linebackers can't cover them. So now Vic Fangio's trying to get out in front of that with something else, and we'll see if that works for him.
I remember talking to Vic Fangio. We brought this up many times on the show about my conversation with him at the Combine. He wants to be 4 deep at starters at cornerback. Right now, they're projected to be that. I mean, again, and after the experience of last year, dealing with all the injuries that they dealt with, this seems like maybe a dramatic swing the other way, but you kind of have to be in this division and considering what the quarterbacks are going against.
Well, right, and that's kind of the thing is you look around and you look at the way that offenses are evolving, and defenses typically try to play catch up with that a little bit, and I think Vic Fangio's trying to be out in front of that with the next evolution, kind of a hybrid dime package as your base where you're able to use a hybrid corner, somebody like that, to cover these super athletic monster freak tight ends. And, like I said, last year they tried covering him with a linebacker. They tried covering with a safety. They tried bracket. None of it worked. So now you just go out and get a corner and play him like a receiver.
So the decision not to take Justin Fields, who was available there, also McCorkle Jones, both quarterbacks were there at 9, and some of the fan base is still split on that decision.
We said on this show very clearly, very explicitly, and very many times that if the right quarterback was there, they would have taken him. The right quarterback was not there. And I've seen all kinds of reporting out there about Justin Fields if they hadn't taken Surtain. And you could say you'd taken anybody if you hadn't taken Pat Surtain. But at the end of the day,
you have your board stacked a certain way.
Right. But at the end of the day, you took Pat Surtain. And that tells you what you thought about which of these quarterbacks you wanted and which ones you didn't. And so, the fan base, whatever, if you want to be mad about it, that's fine. But the moment's passed. Being mad about it isn't going to change the draft. And so I think the best way to look at this is you either hope that Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock can become something in this league, You hope that they trade for Aaron Rodgers, or you find a different team to root for because Justin Fields isn't walking through that door.
And it comes back to something that we've said multiple times on the show as well, that what you hope the team does doesn't mean that the team feels the exact same way about it. So there is a certain moment where you can be disappointed. Heck, I'm disappointed. I wanted Justin Fields. I did want Justin Fields, but I had to move off of that soon because I have to understand that, well, let's talk about why Pat Surtain made sense for the Broncos. Let's see why they felt so strongly about him that they wouldn't take any of the trade backs. Look, I had ranked it. I was like, go quarterback or trade back. Those were my top two options. They didn't do either of those. But I could have come on here and just like taken a flamethrower to everything, being like, oh, I'm so angry. But again, we can be emotional. We can be upset in the moment, but you do have to eventually move past it and just say, if nothing else, the Broncos got better. It's one of the few prospects that most people considered didn't have very many holes in their game. Now, I like J.C. Horn as my number one guy. I could also be upset about that. But the whole point of this little rant here is just that you can be upset about it. You can be frustrated about it, but understand that the team, the organization doesn't necessarily have to see it the same way you do, and eventually you're going to have to get over it.
Yeah, and that's the thing I think people need to, it's okay to want certain things, okay to be fans of certain things, okay to root for certain things. But at the end of the day, the team has a better idea of what's going on internally than you do, than we do. I'll include myself in it, than we do. And so, they feel more confident in Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock than the fan base does. And I think that George Paton in his first year gets some leeway with that. I think you do. I think you have to give him that. So for me, I'm going to wait to see what hits the field. Maybe there may even be the Aaron Rodgers possibility, but I'm going to wait to see what hits the field before I'm lobbing critiques. I'm not a hot take radio guy. I don't need to make an instant critique right now over on the hater and make that happen.
And certainly if you would have drafted Justin Fields, you probably wouldn't be going after Aaron Rodgers at that point.
Correct.
You'd be going into the season with the direction that you decided to go at quarterback. When we come back, we'll get to the day 2 picks. Broncos took 3 guys. We'll get to them next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
All right, welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. We're breaking down the 2021 NFL Draft, what the Broncos came away with, and we're going to get to day 2 now. And the Broncos make a trade right at the beginning of day 2. Jacksonville takes Tyson Campbell. Elijah Moore goes to the New York Jets, and the Broncos trade up to pick 35 with the Atlanta Falcons and get Javonte Williams. They swap a couple of late picks, a 4th and a 6th. But in the end, they take a running back that they were targeting. And this is something that I want to make sure we say that's appropriate, because Broncos fans are kind of mixed again on this. Like the first pick was mixed because they didn't take a quarterback, and they're mixed now because of trading up for a running back. But in the end, don't we always say, if you love a guy, go get the guy? Like if you have a guy targeted and you think he can improve your team in year 1 and beyond, just go get him. I don't see why we have to come after the fact and say, well, the value of running backs and what do we look at that? And I see even your eye roll. That's kind of how I felt about that, seeing that on Twitter.
Yeah, the accountants have taken over football. It was the chemists in the 80s and 90s. Now the accountants have taken over football. You can't trade up to get certain positions. It's just not allowed, right? The Broncos had a target, and they got some intel that Miami was going to take that running back and Javonte Williams, and they were. I can tell you Miami was definitely going to take him. And so they decided to trade up and get their guy. Why wouldn't you be excited that they had a guy targeted, a guy they believed in, and they moved up a couple of spots to get him while giving up almost nothing to do it?
And they were going to address running back at some point in the draft anyways.
Right. So they move up. They get the number, depending on who you look at, number 1, 2, or 3 running back in the draft.
PFF happens the number 1 guy.
Right. And in the end, you get your guy and you move forward from there. I'm not seeing a problem here. And I'm glad that, like I said, that they've got internal intelligence around the league to kind of see where they need to move to do these kinds of things. So, I think that...
you were a guy that did want more of a day 3 running back.
I would have Ramondre Stevenson personally.
Yes.
But, like I said, I'm okay with that. Javonte was a guy, I think I had RB3 in my
I thought
rankings.
it was RB2, but we'd have to go back.
2, yeah, because I think I had Etienne at 3. Mm-hmm. So I think I had him as RB2 in my running back rankings. I'd have to go back and look.
But to get that guy in the second round, and don't forget, George Paton coming from the Vikings organization, Dalvin Cook has been pretty dang good for them as a guy they targeted on day 2.
Yeah, they make moves. And it's kind of funny, the back and forth between Miami and Denver over the course of this draft. Denver was looking at Jalen Phillips as he was falling. and Jamin Davis. Jamin Davis goes to Washington. Jalen Phillips comes down. He keeps on falling, and then Miami snaps him up. So the Broncos didn't get a chance to get him, right? Well, come back in the second round. The Broncos jump in front of Miami to make sure they get the guy they want. And then later on when Quinn Meinerz was selected, that's another player that Miami was eyeballing that Denver, kind of got in front of before Miami got him. So it was kind of funny to see the back and forth between friends and rivals and Chris Greer and George Payton. And, Greer won round 1, but George Payton came back and hit him in rounds 2 and 3.
It's funny, by the way, Richie Grant, the guy that we were going on and on about how much we wanted him, went at pick 40 to Atlanta.
Which would have been the original Broncos pick, but yes, he went at 40 to the Atlanta Falcons.
So we're
very much on him.
Yes, and tip of the cap to you. You said there was no way he was going to get past. If you didn't take him at 40, you weren't going to get him any later. We both really like Richie Grant. So if the Broncos would have gone their safety, they went safety later. We'll get to that. But if they would have gone safety in the second round, that would have been the pick. And Javonte Williams, again, he profiles as a bell cow back. I said he's one of the most complete running backs in this draft class. He had more missed tackles, more broken tackles than any other running back in college football. That's what he does.
Well, right, and he's the natural successor to Melvin Gordon. I don't know that he's necessarily going to be the feature guy this year. They'll try to get their mileage out of Melvin, but if Melvin starts fumbling the football again, yeah, you bring him in. There you go. He's the natural successor to that, so.
All right, in round 3, the Broncos trade back twice. So they get into round 3, the pick 71. They trade back one time. They go back about 5 picks. And then they end up splitting that pick again, going back with the New Orleans Saints. There was a really fun video, by the way, that floated out there. And I think he was on the conversation with Miami, wasn't he?
He was on the phone with Chris Greer when he said, I got somebody who's going to offer me more. I don't know if people know that or not. Okay. So if you're finding that out, you're finding that out here. But
it was great.
Yeah.
But again, he's got that relationship. And it is about, some people were like, oh, man, he really stuck it to them. It's like, no, he... Like understand that sometimes these conversations are more, I don't know, they're more friendly than they seem.
Yeah, his teams are. It's not like draft day where that's not how it. That's not really how it goes down. Most of these guys are funny and fun and all that kind of stuff. And our John Dorsey always has fun with Chris Ballard every year, crank calling him at some point in the draft and offering him some ridiculous deal and all that kind of stuff. Like these guys are friends, they're colleagues, they're coworkers in a sense. They all work in the same league and work in the same industry. So, there is some animosity between some people in this league, but reality is most of these guys are friends and friendly.
So they get the Saints picks 98 and 105. They take offensive guard / center Quinn Meinerz out of University of Wisconsin-Whitewater, and you're a huge fan of this pick.
Oh, I was absolutely ecstatic. I was beaming. I was jumping up and down when it happened. I could not have been more excited. Quinn's a guy we had on the show back after the Senior Bowl. He's a guy I've known about since about 2019, give or take, when his coaches pointed him out to me when I was looking at Kumero's little brother up there at UW-Whitewater, and he said, this guy eats people. He's going to be a monster in the league or whatever. And the coaches were like, well, it's UW here, so he's probably going to get a day 3, probably end up being a day 3 pick. Then the Senior Bowl happened, and everybody couldn't stop buzzing about Quinn Meinerz and the belly and all that kind of stuff. Fans here are going to love him. He's going to be the next Dalton Reisner in terms of his personable nature.
And he fits the personality of that locker room, especially that offensive line.
Yeah, absolutely. Blends right in. In fact, he and Reisner had each other's numbers within a few minutes, and we're talking to each other. Everybody loves it, and he's going to start out at center, by the way. I know some people were talking about guard. He's going to start out at center and backing up the guards. Now, he'll push Cush, and one of those two will win a job at center. I put my money on Quinn.
Yeah, well, Cushenberry definitely has some things to prove. Last one here, Baron Browning goes at pick 105. I love this pick. This was one of my guys. Baron Browning was either him or Jabril Cox that you had a shot at there. He's got some ability to cover as a linebacker. He could eventually just be an outside linebacker pass rusher for you. The fact is they're going to try to cross-train him at both.
Right. The thing about Jabril Cox is Cox was only a go-away-from-the-ball linebacker, where Browning can go sideline to sideline and come downhill. So he gives you more versatility. I think he can back up on the edge rush, and he can be kind of an inside guy. You can use him in different sub-packages, goal line, short yardage as well. So I think he provided the most versatility. I love the pick. He's a guy I liked, you liked. We were talking about back at the Senior Bowl as well. I thought they crushed it on day 2. I could not have been happier about those day 2 picks.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And Baron Browning, unblockable out there at the Senior Bowl, which is something we talked about a ton on Broncos Country tonight. When we come back, the day 3 picks, what did the Broncos do without a 4th rounder? We'll get to that next.
Welcome back to Broncos Country Tonight. Here are Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Broncos Country Tonight, breaking down the 2021 NFL Draft. The Broncos come away with 10 players, and 6 of those were on day 3. No fourth-round pick. The Broncos use that fourth-round pick in the Javonte Williams deal. They could have potentially packaged their 2 fifth-rounders and moved up, but they decided to stand pat, and at pick 152, they take safety Caden Stearns out of Texas, and we'd see 2 safeties going off the board here in round 5. But what did you think about the pick of Caden Stearns?
I mean, I liked it. They needed to get some safety depth. I know you like the other safety a little bit better. Stearns, to me, he's a little closer to Simmons and kind of gives you that archetype. I think that's really what it was about, is just trying to find some depth. He's going to be a core special teams guy. You could see 3 safety rotation. He could come in, be kind of heavy nickel a little bit more. They got to clean up his tackling, but, he's kind of that. And then, I thought it was a good pick. I thought both those safety picks were good picks. They're good depth picks. Neither of them are what you'd call, I guess, inspiring in terms of being something that you're all like, wow, but both of them, I think, are good picks, good solid depth picks, and needed to happen.
No, speak for yourself. I love the Jamar Johnson pick.
Well, I know you.
That's the one guy. That guy should have been a day 2 pick. I honestly really believe that. He's a top 100 guy on several people's boards. I thought Jamar Johnson should have gone earlier. The thing you brought up about the tackling, it's kind of a knock against both of them. Mm-hmm. Jamar Johnson gets accused of making business decisions, and you can't really do that at the safety position. That's just not a thing you can do. Not really anywhere on the defense, but especially at safety if you're a last line of defense. Jamar Johnson will be the guy that's going to maybe eventually take over Kareem Jackson's role if Kareem Jackson is really only a 1-year deal. Caden Stearns, you said it perfect. Caden Stearns is Justin Simmons, and at least what he profiles as what he could be at the next level. Again, the development is important here. But we said coming into this thing, they expect the Broncos to go pretty heavy on the defensive side. Start the rebuild now. Start to build that depth now. Get them in the building, because you more or less have most of your starting spots spoken for.
Yeah, and they did exactly that. You go back and you look at this draft top to bottom, I think it was 70% defense. The offensive picks were the ones that we thought, all O-line and halfback we knew, and probably another receiver. And sure enough, there you go. And I thought the receiver pick was a bit interesting. He's a speedster, but he's also a contested catch guy. Likes to jaw. If you go back and look at the tape,
look at Seth Williams.
One of the things I did over the weekend was look at the tape on him, and man, he likes to chirp. So that's going to be interesting. Might give the Broncos offense some attitude. It's been lacking a little bit.
No, I'm with you. And I had a chance to talk to Seth Williams after he was drafted. He was the 6th round pick, the one they got from the Falcons. So they went safety in the 5th round. They went with a wide receiver in the 6th round. And Seth Williams out of Auburn is a contested catch guy. And you have to, again, add some depth even just to that, because you think, well, Tim Patrick, we'll see what he ends up being. He's an RFA right now. He's going to be an unrestricted next year. Cortland Sutton's got another year left here. And eventually you're going to need to be looking for more of that archetype of body to bring onto this team. But George Paton said something that's very important, and most of the time it is the case for these day 3 picks. Special teams is very important, and they think that Seth Williams can be a core special teamer.
Yeah, and I think so, and I think he's a natural successor to one of these guys that's going to get moved off the bottom of the roster eventually. You know who your 3-4 receivers are right now, but Tim Patrick, he's going to be due a big contract next year, and I don't think the Broncos are going to pay that. Deshaun Hamilton, I'm certain they're not going to pay that. Deontay Spencer, they've kind of flirted around with upgrading that position. Tyree Cleveland's a guy that, he comes in and he's played pretty well. So, I think Cleveland will jump into that Tim Patrick spot after this year, and I think that 5 and 6 roster spot are open, and Seth Williams looks like a guy who could do that.
It certainly felt as though the Broncos were sticking to their board at a lot of these spots. We even heard from Vic Fangio that the Jamar Johnson pick was a board-specific, he was just the top guy on our board at that point.
Yeah, and that's interesting to me. And, I think everybody talks about him being higher on their personal boards, but at the end of the day, they drafted the other safety before him. So that says a little something about what the Broncos were valuing. But I think that I like the draft overall. I'm not a draft grade guy, but I thought the draft was pretty good. It looked like it's pretty good from this end. There have been drafts I've winced before. This wasn't one of them. I know people are going to be upset about the quarterback thing, but if you take that out of the equation for a minute and just look at what you acquired instead of what you could have acquired or what you might have. If you look at what you acquired, you got solid players across the board, and I think it's going to be a good class.
Let's very quickly touch on the 7th rounders. They go Kerry Vincent Jr. out of LSU. He's a slot corner. He's one of those guys that he's a track star guy, right? He's like tons of speed, and he had like 4 interceptions, I think, a couple years ago. He's definitely a guy that I think fits what Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel like in their corners.
Yeah, if they can coach him up. Right now he's got more rap albums than he does career interceptions, but
come on.
No, he's an aspiring rapper. I'm trying to plug his music.
Are you?
Maybe. And they I think that if he can get coached up, he could be something. That's really, how you look at that one. Is you're taking a flyer on a guy who's got speed, but you need to refine him and see what happens.
Speaking of guy that's raw, Jonathan Cooper, defensive end at Ohio State. And as you asked George Payton about that in our exclusive interview about the Ohio State pipeline, because you got Baron Browning, Draymond Jones a couple of years ago. Jonathan Cooper, man, I mean, he's a really good interview. He's a really interesting team captain kind of guy. If he develops, this could be a steal.
He's a beloved guy.
Yes.
And you could see that. There's a video out there on Twitter. The kids in the neighborhood came up and congratulated him after he got drafted. It's a great video if you love those kinds of things. And, he's just a beloved guy. Nobody has a bad word to say about the guy. So that's one of those glue guys, the locker room that you bring in, and he's good. If you get something out of him productivity wise, so be it. But I think Bill Kolar can absolutely do that. But just a guy you take a flyer on there in the 7th. Team captain, glue guy, great locker room guy who maybe doesn't have the plus traits, but does have a little something there, and you want to see what you can get out of him.
Yeah, and also last one, Marquise Spencer, defensive end on Mississippi State. Just another, again, raw project defensive end. But the Broncos, as you mentioned, going really heavy on the defensive side of the ball. We'll continue to break it down throughout the week right here on Broncos Country Tonight.
Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight. Tune in to Broncos TV every weeknight at 6:30, right here on KTVD Channel 20.